I'm a trans person living in Iceland, and I think I've been harassed more for speaking English than I have been harassed for being trans.
If your last name doesn't end in son or dotter, then you might be overlooked.
It starts with a form. Your name, date of birth, your reason for coming here.
Maybe you're here for your partner, or work, or for safety.
For those of us born here, we rarely think about what it takes to become a part of this country.
But for others, like Joy and Dan, it's a journey, and sometimes a complicated one.
When I was moving to Iceland, I looked online and it had a population of 300,000 something people. And so I was very worried that I was moving to a village. And when I got here, I arrived past midnight and I took the bus from Keflavik, and there were no lights anywhere for miles, and it was pure darkness, and I just had a full-on breakdown.
My first memory of Iceland was I was rummaging through my grandma's stuff, and I found this like really crumpled yellow map, and there was like this tiny dot there, and you could only see like the name, like Reykjavík, the capital city. And I was like 6 or 7 at the time. I thought that was like, oh, this is a map to like the city of Atlantis.
My direct first impression was that this country is ridiculously beautiful, and the people here don't see it.
But then there's the why.
For Joy, leaving was a matter of safety, identity, and ambition.
And for Dan, it was more unexpected.
Hi, I left Venezuela in 2014. I moved to Colombia first, and then there was the opportunity to come to Iceland via the same organization. I applied kind of like for funsies. I was very sure somebody from Europe was going to get elected. I like to say in a kind of a funny way that I didn't choose Iceland, Iceland chose me.
Turkey's quite shit as it currently is. It feels bad bashing my country so much, but economically it's not doing very well. There is immense social pressure in the country to do a master's abroad. But also I was gay at the time. So I knew that Turkey doesn't have lots of gay rights, doesn't have equality for queer people, so I wanted to leave.
One of the most persistent challenges for immigrants is learning a new language. But is it really worth learning the hardest language in the world? For immigrants, this question is very divisive.
Icelandic as a language is incredibly difficult, and some people, especially older Icelanders, are very, very annoyed if you don't speak Icelandic with them.
If you live in Iceland and you speak English, you get about 50% of the Icelandic experience. So once you start learning Icelandic, you open up to that other half. For example, if you are speaking English to your Icelandic friend Bjarki, and then Bjarki runs into his friend Hjörtur from leikskóli, they start speaking Icelandic and you disappear. You socially disappear to them.
This shirt was actually given to me by a coworker because an old Icelandic lady at work wouldn't stop yelling at me for speaking English.
Immigration is a part of our daily life here in Iceland, but it's a fairly recent chapter in our nation's story. It wasn't until the 1990s, when Iceland joined the EEA, that immigration first started to grow. We had people from places like Poland and Lithuania coming here to work, shaping whole towns and industries. But in recent years, there's been a mounting pressure on the immigration system, first from the war in Ukraine, and then from asylum seekers from places like Venezuela. And this has put a strain on a system that was not built for scale.
Iceland is a little bit new to this having people over. Yes, they have had people over because of the freedom of movement. People like us, like Venezuelans or other people who would come to actually set the roots here. That is a little bit of a foreign concept, pun intended.
Beyond the paperwork, there is a practical side of life, to work and to be able to afford to stay. For immigrants, making ends meet often means sacrifice and sometimes improvisation.
I did not have a lot of money when I first moved to Iceland, and I would not be able to stay for long unless I found a part-time job. So because Iceland is so expensive, we at the dorms would organize dumpster diving groups and go to various trash cans in the city to find non-expired food that had been thrown away.
Wow. When you immigrate, you kind of turn into this Beyonce after Destiny's Child kind of deal. You have to work twice as hard. You don't know anybody. If your last name doesn't end in son or dotter, then you might be overlooked.
Basically, if you want a work permit in Iceland, you have to prove to the government that no Icelander can do this job or no Icelander wants to do this job. So even if you find a job that's willing to hire you, you need to go through an application process where they will open employment to Icelanders, and if no Icelanders apply, then the immigration office and the labor office will see if they want you or not.
I myself had to change careers. Like, I came here with a graphic design degree under my belt. I'm a teacher now.
I have friends from the EU who are being hired by preschools despite not knowing Icelandic, because schools are so desperate for teachers.
Iceland is often seen as a sanctuary, especially for queer and trans people, but no place is without tension.
And in today's climate, where anti-immigrant and anti-queer sentiment can surface even in progressive societies, that sense of safety can shift quite quickly.
The first time I was assaulted in Iceland was we were playing Dungeons and Dragons at student housing, and an Icelandic man, he climbed through the window, started speaking Icelandic to us, and we were asking him to leave, and then he started yelling, "Why are you speaking English?" And he got so mad that he picked up my sugar jar and threw it at a friend. He missed, and so we tackled him to the ground and we sat on him until the police arrived. And during this time, he kept telling us, "You guys don't have any friends here. You don't have anyone to protect you here. My friends are gonna come get me and we're gonna come back and attack you."
I've seen it on my own social media as well when I posted videos. You get comments of like, "Yeah, but like you don't know anything because you're an immigrant." Or like when you see the news on Facebook and you make the mistake of opening the comments, one of the very first comments are like, "But where are they from? Why don't we send them out of the country?" And that's made it a little bit more difficult for migrants to set their roots here, because then it's the us versus them idea being reinforced. The fact that there's like basically every other week news report of somebody getting deported for whatever reason. I'm not like so like isolated of like, oh, this is not about me. Because what if next year that if I had to apply to something, I get somebody that's reviewing my applications, and at the end it's a yes or no from a person that's checking my applications, and I don't know whether they woke up happy or sad.
For Dan and Joy, once the paperwork had finished and the day-to-day became more manageable, they finally had the chance to explore their identity through performance, humor, and community.
Time flies when you're dealing with immigration. I started doing stand-up after 2020, after I became a permanent resident, where I could have a show, get paid for it, because if it would come up in my tax records that I was getting money from another source of income other than the one that hired me, I'd get in trouble. I could get the renewal denied.
I have been working as a drag queen and a stand-up comedian for a little bit over a year. It feels a little weird calling myself a drag queen, because I do dress up and I go to drag nights and I do that, but it's not too different from what I would do out of drag.
Years later, how do you know you belong?
For some, it's a passport, but for others, it's a song.
Getting citizenship here was kind of like watching the last episode of Game of Thrones. You have been doing all of this epic tale of like for my applications and my visas and all of that. And when I got the decision that I became a citizen, I got it through a PDF on my email. The previous seasons were a little bit more like nerve-wracking. This was just like very anticlimactic. Really going back to like the Björk fan, whenever I reached a milestone in my immigration, I would play to myself this song from her first album, the anchor song, or Umakari, because there's a line in Icelandic like "Hér vill ég vera, hér á ég heima."
this little trans flag. She saw it on my desk and she said, "Oh, that's such a beautiful flag. It's lovely colors. What country's flag is it?" And my panicked parents in the call just yelled, "Iceland!" So you know what? I'm proud being Icelandic. Thank you everyone so much. I've enjoyed.